hello, and thanks to everyone for joining the conversation today on behalf of the Biennial of the Americas in Denver, Colorado. I'm Ray Rinaldi. I'm a journalist and critic and art writer, and I'm based in Denver and also Mexico City. And I write about art and architecture publications across the US, the New York Times, Hyperallergic, Dwell, a bunch of magazines. But I usually write about art and architecture in Mexico or by Mexican artists. And that's what we want to talk about today. So I just want to give a quick hello to the people in the room. I'll start with Paula Santos Coy, who I think is in Mexico City.
I am.
Great.
Yes.
Hola. And Geronimo Miguelmen, who is an artist known for, among other things, his sort of large-scale interventions, often using botanicals in public spaces. And Geronimo, ¿dónde estás?
In Barcelona.
Great. So it's later there.
It's kind of, close to 7.
We're still drinking coffee here. So, and Gonzalo, who's an artist who's very hard. Your work is very hard to describe because it crosses so many disciplines. But where are you today? You're not in Mexico.
I am in Mexico. I am in a town called Emiliano Zapata in Nayarit. This is the town of Punta Mita in Nayarit.
Oh, great. Okay, so along the Pacific Ocean.
The Pacific Ocean. Very close.
Great. Okay, so one of the reasons we're here today is because the Biennial of the Americas in Denver is 10 years old this year. And that's a milestone for us here. And while we're not exactly celebrating that in the middle of a pandemic, it does give us an opportunity here to sort of look back and to look forward and to sort of hash out the mission of the Biennial and to maybe solicit some of your help in the Biennial going forward. But the mission, as I see it, and I'm a journalist, right? I just write about the Biennial. I'm not part of the organization, is really to just introduce people to each other across borders, particularly Mexico and the US. But then as an organization to sort of reintroduce people again and again and again so that we get comfortable in a global relationship. And part of that is sort of understanding each other's art and culture and you know, way of life, but also to enjoy each other, to sort of like have some fun together and get to know each other. So we thought it would be interesting to gather the three of you because you are all part of the first Biennial 10 years ago. And that was a milestone for us, really. Like we did not know what was going to happen, but it's continued to happen. But Gonzalo, you did this sort of now famous car sculpture called History of Suspended Time that was installed in sort of the lower downtown part of Denver. And it was this automobile sort of about to plunge into a body of water, but frozen in time. And then Geronimo, you had this massive installation in front of the main building, the McNichols building, where the Biennial was headquartered. And it was this fabric, this pink fabric stretched way out into the lawn. And then you added all these botanicals and then added these sort of crowns of botanicals on the columns of this very elegant neoclassical building. And then Paula, of course, you were sort of mission control for that. You were the curator of the main event, The Nature of Things, the exhibition in the Biennial. So I didn't spend a lot of time on introductions on you folks because I want you to introduce yourselves, but I want you to sort of do that by talking about your work. And all three of you are so accomplished with such long resumes that I think it's probably difficult to be concise about what you do. But I think that's in a way like who you are, more than saying like I had a show here or I worked here. It's you speak through your work. So maybe like we could start with Gonzalo. Can you just sort of tell us like what you do? And I know there's video and there's painting and there's installations, but something has to pull it all together. So what is that's something that where it all intersects?
Okay, yes. As you said, I work with different mediums. I don't know when I started to work with different mediums. I guess I started with photography, and then I sort of had always the feeling of using different mediums and to incorporate it in the work. And I believe art is not about the medium. I mean, the medium is, of course, very important. The techniques are very important too, I guess. But what is for me more important, and I have always seen art as a language. And and that's what it matters. I think to develop a language in art is what it takes time, and once you are developing this language, you can use different mediums, and you can, of course, not all of the mediums you will have full control over them, but with time you can learn, because there are techniques, and the techniques are easy to. They're not easy to learn, but it's something that if you encourage yourself to do it, you can at certain point do them. No, so for me, art is language, and the language I've been trying to develop is around the question of time and the fugacity of time. This is something that I didn't choose. I guess it was something that in a way was sort of like following me in the works I've done. I think in my case, everything has the art I have done and the art I still do. It's always around my intuition, and the intuition, I guess, is not always precise. Intuition can be very imprecise, can be very accidental. So I guess I just follow this intuition, and it has, and I also have, I think this language is being developing through the works I've been doing, and for me it's easy to understand what I do after I do it, and to think, okay, what am I doing? Am I trying to build a language? What do I complement my language if I work this? I don't work like that. I just I work more for as I said, with a more with intuition, and more with an impulse, no, of the impulse of imagination, I guess, and through these subjects, and through these projects that I developed, then I start to think about how this language is being developing. For me, art is every work you do is connected. In my case, I guess, like as an artist, you sort of like every work it becomes a chapter of your book, no, and at the end will be just one book that you will read, from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting way to think about it. And I think as you get sort of further along in your career, you start thinking about how that book is shaping up, or what that book's message is going to be. So do you start with an idea and then figure out which media is best for expressing that idea, or do you start with the media and try to express an idea through it?
No, I always start with ideas. I never start with thinking about the medium, never. And yes, I start with ideas, and then after being thinking about one idea, then I start to see what possibilities it have to become an artwork, no? And then I start to think about mediums, and some ideas can be done in so many different mediums, and sometimes this is very joyful.
Right. I want to ask about a few pieces that I appreciate of yours. One is the Via Lactea, which is Milky Way in English. And it's this beautiful, evocative video, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes long. And it's really just this row of men, I think in Cuba, smoking cigars, and you capture the smoke beautifully.
Men and women.
Men and women, sorry, it's dark. And you play with the light a lot. You capture the smoke in the air, but you also sort of put these amazing sort of like reflections of light on their faces. So what were you doing with that work?
Well, that work, well, just to give you a little bit more of context, I work with things that I really enjoy and like, and I am a big cigar smoker, and I guess this is how I start this idea of working with cigars. I had this kind of a grantship to do a project in Cuba. Actually, strange, but it was a grantship done by an American foundation called the Shifting Foundation, which I was surprised they gave me this grant, because I proposed them to do a project in Cuba, and a project done, I mean, around the subject of cigars, about tobacco. So it was, I think it was pinch and very and incredible that they gave me this project that taking, I mean, through this condition, right? And so the project was, the guys who you see smoking is the Club del Habano, which is these guys are probably the most how do you say, the most professional cigar smokers in the world. It's a very incredible group with men and women divided equally. And so how I brought them there, this project was in the patio of the Museum of Bellas Artes, which the Museum of Bellas Artes have this incredible exhibition about Cuban art from 16th century till now. And so it was done at the patio of the museum, where I use all the chairs from the cafeteria and make this line of people. There were like 30 people seated on this line, and over them I placed these lights. This is like this sort of like, it's not a laser light, but it's a beam light, very, very close, that they get together and make one line. So all the people who were smoking behind this line, when the light cross, the light becomes visible. The ray of light becomes visible, and it also reflects the light, and so the people get reflected. They get illuminated by their own exhalation of the smoke that they exhale.
Right.
And I thought that was very beautiful, this idea to enlighten yourself with your breath, with your smoke, no? And also that this that there was, there is a photograph. I don't know if you saw it, but this is the field where you see the solemnity of the performance. But in the photograph, I had a photograph with an open lens, per se.
Tampoco sé.
So anyway, when you let the things happen, and the camera is taking, so you can see the visibility of the line, and you see it becomes like a very like a sort of like a Last Supper kind of image, no?
Right.
With the light above the 30 people smoking. And for me, this idea also, this idea of course of the Cubans smoking cigars and reflecting this line, which is called the Via Láctea, which I think something that has surprised me about Cuba is this symptom of the lack of liberty, which they have been suffering since the revolution. And I'm a very big fan of Cuba. I like to go. I try to go as often as I can. I think it's an amazing country. But this is something that surprised you. They have, like, they can smoke cigars and drink rum, and they have like good food because everything is organic. But this just sense of lack of, like, people that cannot, now they are, of course they can move, but before they, and not all of them can. But this idea just like being stuck in the island without going back. So this sort of feeling of lack of liberty, which I was taking attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the sort of metaphor of like bringing like if the Via Láctea is probably the object that your eyes can see, and that it's further away, because these are galaxy millions of years away from us. Mm-hmm. So it's this metaphor to bring what is as further away, to bring it just above, and it becomes very close and visible when just with the exhalation of the smoke.
It works on many levels.
I was trying to make a metaphor.
Yeah, it works on many levels because it's beautiful to look at, but it also feels sort of like infinite to me. Like there's no beginning and no end to it. It feels like they've been sitting there smoking for like 100 years, and they're just going to continue doing that. And it leads me to this other piece that you showed recently called Eternal Flame, maybe. And it's sort of like I've only seen it in photographs, but a cigarette lighter that's sort of burning on a pedestal in a gallery, but it burns forever, right?
Yeah. It's it's a very common big plastic, like plastic big. It's not plastic, because if it would be a big plastic, it would burn, no, it wouldn't hold the light for a long time. But so I have to make a replica of a big light, which is exactly the same, but it's just aluminum instead of plastic. And in the base there is a big gas tank, which so as you see in the pedestal, I like this work because when you see it from far away, when you start to enter into the room and you see it from far, it looks like a candle. But once you enter and you see it's not a candle, it's a lighter, no? And there's something magical about a lighter that is being lighting by itself, no? And it's a very common object, that very ephemeral common object that in a way is suspended. It's not like a candle can be light because the wax can sustain the flame, but in a lighter you have to press it to burn it, to turn it on, and if you don't press it, then it's become magic, no, in a way. So this confrontation between like this, the light of a candle, and also that always when I show it in the room, it have to be completely dark. So whatever the light of the candle can enlight, no, which is so you can barely see the walls. It's a very small light, just one flame, and so yeah, it's more about this surprise, no, that once you approach and you see this sort of once you enter into a dark room and you see only one light, it becomes like a mystical place. But once you confront the work and you see what it is, then it becomes something else.
Yeah, I love it because it's just a very simple idea, but it's poignant. I'll move to Paula. Paula, can you just give us the brief intro to El Eco and tell us what you do there? But I don't want to tie your personal identity too closely to it. So tell us what you do as a curator in general.
Yes. Well, I think one of my main interests has been for a while now to work with artists producing new projects, which is something that I think it's tied to El Eco, but not only. I think it's been really amazing to be at a space like El Eco, which has in its name the word experimental. No, it's called Experimental Museum El Eco. And that's already like a carte blanche for many things. Just say we're an experimental space. You can almost do anything within that frame, or really try to imagine every time that frame. No, I say from the museum, we're not trying to define what's experimental. No, we're really trying to be experimental every time, kind of trying to open more and more questions. And I'd say that's really in conversation with artists, which is something that interested me since I started working, really. I studied art history here in Mexico City and started going to a lot of parties where I met many artists, friends. And that's when I realized very, very soon that I wanted to work with what's being produced now, and really with living artists and in conversation, which I think leads to focusing on an experience really of art. I think that's what's, I'd say it's important for me, and also the experience of site specificity, more linked to El Eco, but also to the Biennial of the Americas, or to the Mercosur Biennial, or to other projects where I've done projects with artists. I think the experience of site specificity is something that it's a constant question for me, really, how the context affects, how it depends whether you're working in a white cube, or in a space that's not neutral, or in public space. I think all of those are questions that are always present for me, more than thinking of an idea of an exhibition and bringing it to life, kind of having it clear in my mind and just hanging the exhibition and kind of completing it. I think it's the other way around, like really getting to a place, starting a conversation, and starting with ideas, and also having always this, or knowing always that you're not aiming only for the final work or the final project. No? And I think the process is also very important for me, and I think it's something that I give a lot of attention to that, and I appreciate a lot artists really working with me or with other curators or with the team really in those processes, because it becomes a collaboration in a way. Mm-hmm. It always becomes a collaboration. And I'd say something else that has become very important too is how to link the project or the final pieces to a public program or a kind of a pedagogical program. And I think it's something quite complicated. No, it's not as easy as it seems, or just thinking kind of developing something around the topic. But really, I like to get into the ideas behind the works and try to think of something else that kind of evolves from there into a public program. And I think, again, Eleco has been a really wonderful thing to work in this way, because we have a community, or very different communities there, that go to the museum, that we can work with, and that come back also to Eleco, and we're kind of together experiencing these different projects that are also, many of them are site specific, and so they're also ephemeral. Some of them can have another life after that, no? and go to other places. Others don't. Others just exist for that frame of time of 3 months of an exhibition, which, now that we were talking about the pandemic and the calendars and the good part of it, or what it has brought to our lives, I think the exhibition calendars in particular are something that I had been feeling that for a long while, kind of as something, how to put it, but you're always thinking in this 3-month period, and kind of thinking ahead, and having that anxiety also to plan 2 years, 3 years, and it's always that time frame, no? Almost never less, never more, because that's kind of the time frame for an exhibition. And since 2 years or more, I think we've been trying to break that at Eleco, and kind of have projects of 1 month and then others of 6, and play with that. And I think right now it's not even us wanting that. Like, you have to let go of the previous idea of having control in an institution, of a plan for the future, because also the lives of everyone that's collaborating with you are changing right now very drastically. So out of those changes, you need to really let go and think that you're only going to occupy the space again. Right. Who knows in which way? It's really, let's occupy it, let's do things, let's really go back to those experiences. And we've been having this talks every Friday via Instagram. No, we started that as part of this, kind of moving to the digital media, but it's been good kind of to talk through a lot of the projects that we've done. Right. And again, trying to think again, what's really the essence of this site-specific experience, and how all the anecdotes and everything that happens around that are also important in trying to think forward and to what's important. No, for me, art is very, very important. I don't think I need to even say it. Like, we devote our lives to that, and to really being convinced that we need art in the world. Mm-hmm. And that we're putting out imagination and poetic ways to think of the present.
Yeah.
So I think a project also like the Biennial of the Americas has, and that exhibition in particular, or the project Gonzalo did, no, has all these stories around, no, everything that happened around how it happened, no, and
You're going to get into that.
yeah, but just to finish, I think that's really what interests me in working, and of course writing about art and but mostly conversations and collaboration with artists.
I love what you're saying about questioning planning, because that is what I hear right now from curators more than anything else. Like, how do we go forward, and what is the role of planning? Because you need to plan if you're going to put exhibitions together and do work in and do catalogs. But because of the pandemic, and because here in the US with Black Lives Matters, the sort of actions that have taken place around the country over race, museums and galleries have felt the need to respond immediately. But they're caught up in this plan, right? They're caught up in like, what this show is starting next week, but it's like, it's about something completely irrelevant to the moment. So it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I think that's what curators are facing across the globe right now, just how to be responsive and still keep up quality. Geronimo, thank you for being patient there.
Love to hear Paula and Gonzalo.
I know, it's amazing. Actually, I have so many more questions for her. But your work seems to be the opposite of what Gonzalo and Paula do, which is, I feel like, and I don't mean to pigeonhole the other two, but you tend to make art or show art that works inside, in spaces, even if they're outside, but in contained spaces. But Geronimo, you're working sort of like, you're like, the world is your canvas in a way. So can you sort of talk about like what you do, and maybe a project or two that you think is typical of your work?
Yes, I don't know. I was just hearing Gonzalo, and I felt when he started saying that he works starting with an impulse. I think we have that in common. I think to do art, you have to start from there, and you start doing projects and adding up projects, and at the end, as he said, you start to read your book and understand more of what you're doing, even though you're in each project you're trying to do something and trying to be very clear of what you want to do. When you start adding them up, you really understand what you're doing. So for me, it was, everything started with a big impulse of doing a trip to Japan, just to have a space without being productive. I was a little bit tired of just having to be productive. I was doing a lot of photography and small sculptures, and I was doing some graphics for museums. I did a lot of museography, and then I really needed space. So as an impulse, I went to Japan. And in the way, I stopped by Kyoto and looked at the Japanese gardens, and something clicked there. And I think it was that I realized that the way you relate to the exterior could be a way to develop a way of thinking, to develop philosophy, to develop a consciousness and a discourse around thoughts. It's not only that it exists there, but how you relate to it. So I came back to Mexico and started doing gardens, actually. I started to work a lot with architects. My father is an architect, so it was very simple for me to relate to architecture, because all my life I've been around it, and I hadn't realized that. But it was really a big impulse. I didn't think about it, and it just started adding up. And I started to observe how difficult it was for an architect to finish his work and actually make connection with the exterior that surrounds architecture. So I had a lot of conversations through doing gardens with architects, and started to understand that, I don't know if it's a conflict, but it's something you have to solve. And then I started realizing that everybody has to solve that relationship, how you relate to the rest of nature. And I say the rest of nature because we are part of nature. Nature is not humans or humans and nature, is we are. I mean, it sounds basic, but I don't think in the everyday discourse is constructed in a way that you think you're part of nature. And so I started doing projects. The first project I was invited was at the Sala Siqueiros by Italia Schmeck. She was the director. Jennifer Titz was the curator for a project in the facade of the Sala Arte Público Siqueiros. That is a very small museum. It was Siqueiros' house, and he had a small studio there. And I did this project of just ivy growing in wires, and it stayed there for almost 5 years, which is, I'm very thankful, because to have that space in a museum for such a long time, it really is something special. But I think the piece needed that time, and I'm glad they gave it, because then the public relates to the piece in a completely different way than just, as Paola was saying, have it 3 months and the next 3 months and the next 3 months. And you think art lives only for 3 months. And actually the experience of an artwork changes with everything that is happening around it. I think if we see the paintings of Picasso nowadays, you see them completely different than when they were painted. So for me, that project was fundamental. And from that on, I started doing personal projects for museums. So every museum was a new challenge. And I worked a lot with the architecture, as you were saying. Even if it's an exterior, it's a space, a defined space. And also I've had the fortune of being invited to different countries to work. So it's not even just the building, it's the city, right, or the country, and then it started growing. It starts growing, and you have to think of a lot of things when you're working, and I really like it. But for me, it's not so much what I say, but the situation I'm constructing. And I think for me, more than 80% of the piece is, once it's there, what happens with it. So actually, even though it has a form and a language, and it's kind of sculpture, I think it's more a situational pieces than sculptures or installations, because it's really, really important the way the people see it and how they live with it. Usually I try to make a situation where people can sit down or even lay down and watch it for a long time. So in that way, I try to affect. And I've worked a lot with plants, but I've started to work also with sunlight and birds and lichens and different levels of reality, and trying to expose a situation with people around a building, usually in public spaces.
Birds don't always cooperate, you know, that's a whole different media. Right?
But for me, it's more the idea that it could happen. Right. It actually has to happen.
Right.
And I like very much that you don't necessarily have to watch a bird come and lay in the sculpture. It's the idea that it could happen or it will happen, and I will not be there to see it.
Right.
But I think that liberty is it makes the artwork grow so much in time, in space, in your mind, Actually, the piece I made for the Echo, I just wanted to bring as much, as many things as possible from the outside inside the museum. So it was incredible, just the idea that you go to the museum to see what is outside the museum.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that made the museum a totally different place.
Yeah. I like the way that you understand architecture, because when an architect makes a building, like people, they talk about like the function of the building and the interior of the building and what is, but for most of us, for 99% of us, we only experience that building from the outside. And your work sort of always, I think, serves as like an introduction to the building. It helps people understand architecture in a way by easing them into something that I think can sometimes be intimidating for people. So it has actually personally helped me understand. I read about architecture. It's helped me focus more on the context around buildings than the actual function of the building.
Yes, I like that. I like that at least I can help people have a personal approach to the space or the building.
Right.
And understand that they can have that liberty of relating in a personal and emotional level to a building that is another art piece, of course.
So we're going to start to run out of time. So I really want to move the conversation back to your Biennial of the Americas experience. And I'm hoping that you can go back like 10 years ago, think about where you were in your career, what it's like to come here and do that project. And maybe like if you took anything away from it, or if you simply regret the whole experience, whatever it is, you can just be honest. So Gonzalo, can you talk about how that piece came to be and what your feeling is about that piece 10 years later? The piece
the pieces started as a photography, which actually it started as a kind of a dream, something that I just appeared into my mind, this idea of the car falling down, and I just suspended in the water, no, like a kind of a religious image, and I had it in my mind for a long time, and I always say like, oh, there must be a way to do it, no, and then I had this opportunity to have this friendship to make a project, so yeah, I found a car. We took the engine off and we threw it with a crane from 30 meters tall, and we shoot it with a high-speed camera, no, to get the moment the car touches the water, no. So I did this image, and once the image became physical, and the image was already somehow developed or brought to reality. Actually, this project was because Adam Lerner came to. I met Adam Lerner in Miami, and he was the director of the museum of the NCA.
The Contemporary Museum in Denver. Go ahead.
Yes, and he approached me and he talked to me about this exhibition he was doing, a group show by the name of Energy Effects, and he we had a very intense conversation about the works, and he was telling me about that he was very interested in the idea of the scale on my work and the way I work with the scale, and that surprised me because it was something that I don't even make it conscious, but so I started to think about that, no, the idea of the scale, and we start, and then I say like, okay, he liked this idea of the photograph, and I told him like, I always wanted the photograph is done, but why don't we do a sculpture? No, why don't we actually make the sculpture of the car, and like we just bring it out of the image, and then we make a stage out of it, no, and it could be a very nice public work to see a car upside down reflected in a water pound, and he loved the idea, Adam, and then we started together to see who could help us to produce the work, because it was not easy, no. I mean, we had to buy a car, we have to produce, and then then we were like looking for different people, and one of the board members, Amy Harmon, who she jumped up and encouraged this project to be. She became the producer, and that's why we make it. No, we did it in there, and at that time it was the parking lot of the museum, which was a very nice public space, because it had this very good visuality from different streets, and it became very, very public downtown, and you can see like a lot of people walking around this area, no? So it was really an experiment. We didn't know what was going to happen, and it actually was it was very nice to see what happened, no? And what I mean, I was staying right in front of the work, besides the museum, in Mark's Falcon's house, and I could see from the window of the room I was sleeping the work, you know, and so I was very in contact with what was happening in the work, and the different kind of people arriving into the parking lot and just stand up in the and I arrived there, of course, without saying that I was the artist or anything, just like as a pedestrian, just get close and just to hear these stories, you know, of what were people were analyzing, or what were questioning, or and what stories they were building out of this sculpture. And I thought that was for me the most precious part of the work, because I mean, you know, you make these works with some thoughts and concepts and pretentiousness, and but at the end, you know, this kind of work became a public sculpture, and I think these public sculptures have to have this sort of discourse, you know, that or this language that can be confrontative to all kind of people, and everybody can relate it somehow. You know, it's not a question of doing a very complex sculpture that only a few will understand, and then there is I think there is a lot of complications there. But if the public work becomes can have the power to establish a dialogue with all kind of people, then it's a successful work, I guess. Yeah. And for me, that was the successful part of it, like to hear all these stories and all these reinterpretations, things that I never thought about the work. Probably they were much more clever and much more smart than what I was, that my purpose. So.
Just nod. Yes, agree. You know, I have to say, it's a legendary moment in Denver public art. It really is. And my only follow-up question to you is that piece in storage? Did you keep that car? Is it somewhere?
Yes, this car is in Palm Springs now, waiting to be. It was supposed to be placed at the Museum of Palm Springs, but it's been there in storage, waiting for the disease to pass.
Oh yeah, perfect.
The pandemic, yeah.
Yeah. Paula, you were very early in your career when you came to the Biennial. So can you talk about how you got connected and how the experience was?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I think I was early in my career, maybe working outside of Mexico, but in Mexico I had been working at different spaces and museums for some time, since 2000 maybe. And then in 2007, I went to San Francisco to do a master's degree. And that's where I met Adam Lerner also. He went to give a talk to CCA, where I was studying. And it was really the last months of my master's degree. We met there, we were talking, and after a few weeks, he called me and said, would you like to come visit MCA and give a talk about Mexican contemporary art? It was just so as open as that. And I said, yeah, why not? I've never been to Denver. I really loved the idea of traveling there. We did a a talk for one night, and then he said, there's this Biennial of the Americas happening in Denver this year. It was January, possibly, and they're looking for a curator for the main exhibition. Would you like to interview? So I said, yeah, why not? And so that's how really it came about, that I ended up moving there like in less than 2 weeks. Really, when they said the exhibition needs to be in June, July, it was less than 6 months. It was really a crazy leap.
Mm-hmm.
We Mexicans like bomberazos, which is when they said, like, do you think you can pull it off? And I said, yeah, 6 months. Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
And then it was really crazy, really a crazy time, and really ambitious, a really ambitious project to pull together in months. Really, I moved to Boulder first. I had never lived in the snow before, or in a place where it snowed. So I didn't know anything about that. Like, I went out walking, trying to get to the office that I was sharing with Action Marketing Group. Actually, it was there.
Yeah.
And I would get all wet. Like, people are like, why aren't you driving? And I'm like, I'm walking. I don't know. Because I don't have a car. No, like, I really didn't know how to live in that weather.
Uh-huh.
And so it was really learning that, living by myself, and really starting to put together this show or this exhibition. And I think what was really great, it was an opportunity for me to reach out to artists, some of them that I already knew before, others that I wanted to work with, and really ask to produce new projects or to bring such or such piece to the show. And there was a lot of openness from the Biennial, although it was kind of difficult to manage.
Uh-huh.
But there was openness in terms of some pieces were produced somewhere else. Like in Peru, for example, the Gabriela Acevedo Velarde was producing there. Lucia Koch was producing in Brazil and then shipped the work. Other pieces were done in Denver. And so it was a really, really a big challenge. And I needed a lot of help and a lot of collaboration around. From people there in Boulder, like this design studio Cypher 13, were like kind of my the first people I met there, and we started talking about the scene. But then many other people through Adam Lerner, actually I started to meet many other people and artists, and doing studio visits, also to incorporate the scene in Denver that I didn't know to this show. And also a big challenge was that the Biennial wanted to do a show that was focused on not only art or visual arts, but visual arts, architecture, and design, which again was a challenge, but it was also interesting to mix all these three and kind of bring them together in the exhibition in the building. Then there's the McNichols building. When we first visited the McNichols building, it's this huge, massive 3-story building, all empty.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing space to work, but also very, very large. I was panicking kind of how to fill that space. And in particular, the project we did with Jerónimo, I think was crucial, because I knew I wanted to do something on the outside of the building, really as in this relationship really to the outside, and not only being inside in terms of thinking of converting McNichols into a traditional exhibition space. I knew I had to leave the space as it was and only use the walls or the rooms that were needed only, and the rest was what was there. And so when I called Jerónimo and I told him about the project and invited him, first thing he said like, okay, yeah, it sounds interesting. It's the summer of next year, right? Like, no. So it's actually this summer, and you would need to be traveling here like in 10 days to see
Wow.
the space and to think of something. So he went there, and we had this really also amazing walks in nature there, no? And really Colorado, something that I think it's really in my heart is really nature and the mountains. Like, I really fell in love with the nature there and the landscape. So we had this visit, this talks, and it was also clear at that moment that it was important.
It was still winter, and we had to think about summer.
See, and so we were thinking of how to exactly move into summer, and also how to, in my mind, it was this idea of tropicalizing somehow, no, this winter landscape, no, or city, and this, yeah, just snow that I've seen for months, not going out, and imagining how summer would be there. I had never been there in the summer. And so that's how we started that project that ended up being really amazing and really a landmark of the show, and that it also had a life throughout the show, no? Because plants were growing. I'll let Jerónimo describe it, but I really loved how he proposed something that would be growing over the time of the exhibition, turning the columns into palm trees. No, luckily that was our vision, kind of bringing palm trees to the facade of McNichols building.
Geronimo, I think most artists would have said no. They would have said, "You're crazy."
Curators also, I think I said yes too early.
That's actually the greatest strength and the greatest weakness of the biennial is that things have often gotten done very quickly. And sometimes, that means they don't come together, but other times it means they're very fresh and very sort of moving. And that's how I would describe your piece, Geronimo. So can you talk about the piece, your history with it?
Yes, I was just hearing Paola and started to remember the whole thing, and I said, well, yeah, that happened. It happened, and it was really fast. I remember she was calling me. I was in Spain also, and I thought, if she's doing it, I can do it. I really thought it that way, because if she thought it was crazy, but it was something worthwhile doing it. So I said, yes, let's try it. And it was a very busy year for me also. I was doing a big piece in Madrid, Matadero. I think it was one of my busiest years. But everything happened, and everything went well, and I'm very, very happy. So yes, as Paola was saying, Ray, she called, and I had to go there as soon as possible because we had little time. So I flew from Barcelona, and we had like 3 days, and then I had to come back to Spain. And I remember I was very lucky because they upgraded me. They have never upgraded me just like that. And so so everything.
That's your memory of the biennial being upgraded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything moved well, and of course we arrived there and went to see the building. And when I saw it, was like, okay, I work with architecture, but this is a real challenge. It's a neoclassical building in Denver, USA. How can I relate to this, and how I can make something that people can relate to this? And we had then we started going around the city, and then we went into nature and started seeing different things that were going on around. In Denver, there was this beetle epidemic that was killing a lot of trees.
No?
And there was a lot of we started seeing a lot of different roads where we can start these different journeys into doing this project. But then we came back and saw again the building, and that was the building we had to work on. And I think when you work at site specific and you're working with a building and you're working with architecture, a big part of the piece is the building. There's no way out. I mean, so I thought this is kind of a scenography in a way. It's not, it's real, but it's not real. It has that double, because if you see a neoclassical building in Europe, it has a meaning and a history.
Right.
You see it in the United States, it doesn't have that. So what does this mean exactly? And then I thought that we always look at other cultures from far away. It doesn't matter where you live, you are always looking at cultures from far away, and some cultures you hardly even know, but you're seeing them through an idealization of another reality. And then I remember I was traveling in Mexico, and I think it was in Nayarit, probably near where Gonzalo is staying, that I stayed in a very small, simple hotel owned by a fisherman. And he rented a room. You could sleep there. And in the room, which was very surprising, there was a reproduction of a painting of like a barbarian feast, like from Germany. And what was that doing in a fisherman?
Right.
A fisherman small guest room. It was, I mean, I have a picture of that because it was really, it talked about a lot of things, I thought. So I remember that, and I thought that if it's a biennial of all Americas, the Americas, there's quite a very different countries that integrates what is America, and they have a different relationship between the South and the North, and how the South can idolize these beautiful snowy mountains of Denver, and how people in Denver can think of these incredible, beautiful Caribbean landscapes or beaches or whatever. I'm not, even though it sounds simple, I think it's very true that we have dreams about other places,
Right.
and we need those dreams to be able to construct our relationship with reality. Right. So I thought, if the McNicholson building is an idealization of the neoclassical building, let's make another scenography on top of that. So let's just, if the columns have these plants, you know, the acanthos plants, I don't know how to say in English, let's put them real. Let's just put whatever is there, but make it real. So we put real plants on top of the rock, of the plants made out of rock. And suddenly they became big palm trees. And then in Mexico, on the street markets, they use this pink fabric that you go inside these tunnels of pink light. So we constructed this canopy made of just this fabric. And then underneath we put these chairs that are called Acapulco chairs. So the name of the piece is actually everything that constructs the piece. And it's different, and it relates to different cultures. So it's the Corinthian columns with the Dublin fabric, because it was called Dublin, and the Acapulco chairs. So I'm just putting a list of the elements in the piece, but everyone relates to, in a way, to another country through different channels. And I think the whole piece really relates to this building that was very complicated to make to do something that the building will be able to talk about relationship with the Americas, no?
Right.
And I think I'm very excited because once the idea was on the table, I showed it to Paola and said, let's do this tropicalization of the building, as she said. And I want to put the plants on the columns, and I want to put this canopy, and let's bring this furniture. So then it started.
Right.
The next step that was how to construct this, and then we work with a lot of persons in Denver to be able to get it done. The fabrics were made in Mexico with the people that actually make the fabrics for the markets. The chairs were made also in Mexico City with a family that makes those chairs and sell them in the park. So we have to keep them. And
I think it's amazing for all three of you how you're able to sort of tell that story from 10 years ago about a work that's 10 years old as if it's fresh. And I think that just goes to why that biennial was successful. And it's because the projects were really thought out. They were really sound, and it showed in the work. So I appreciate that step back that you were all willing to take. That was a big moment here, and we do talk about it. And so it's really great to sort of go back and get a little bit of information about it and surveillance. So we're kind of out of time, unfortunately, because I could talk to you three forever. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time that you guys took to come here today and to be with us. And hopefully the biennial continues. I think that you should all come back for a return engagement sometime, and I will advocate for that personally. Okay.
Right. I would enjoy a lot going back. Actually, I'd like to see it now.
I'll stay at my house. It has a really nice ceiling. Can you see?
Wow.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be lovely to go back.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry we ran out of time, but we'll be in touch with you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you.